Nearly 10 years later, here we are. Since its initial release on the Wii U in May of 2014, Mario Kart 8 and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe have brought Nintendo fans around the world countless hours of entertainment and fond memories. Now with triple the number of tracks we had when we first started, it's time to do a tier list of all 96 of them. I didn't actually start playing the Booster Course Pass until a bit after Wave 5 hit, which means I didn't really play each wave as it released, but one day just sat down and kinda played waves 1 through 5 all at once. I feel like this kinda gives me a unique perspective on the DLC tracks, as I had to take them all in a much shorter time frame than a lot of other people who played each wave as they came out. So, how will I be ranking the tracks? Because Sonic Unleashed is my favorite video game ever, we'll be using that game's ranking system. S rank will be for tracks that I think are almost perfect and that I never get tired of. A rank will be for tracks that I think are really good but are just shy of being considered legendary in my opinion. B rank is for tracks that are quite good but not anything seriously special. C rank will be for mediocre tracks that aren't awful but are definitely lacking in some areas. D rank will be for tracks that I don't enjoy that much and would rather not play on. And E rank will be for tracks that I truly loathe and dread having to race on. Yeah, I know a lot of people call the bottom rank F rank, but as a Sonic fan, no. The lowest rank is E. If I'm running a class, if you fail one of my tests, you get an E, not an F. With that said, class is in session. Let's rank all 96 tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Disclaimer, every ranking is based on my own personal opinion. It may be influenced by nostalgic bias and my own personal taste for what I think makes a good Mario Kart track. Please do not be offended if I rank a track that you really like lower than you think it should be ranked. This is all in good fun. It is a kids racing game at the end of the day, so chill out. Thank you. This is where it all started back in 2014. And I have to say, this track is on a whole nother level compared to any other starting track in a Mario Kart game. That big band arrangement hits fundamentally different and really makes you feel like Mario Kart 8 is kicking everything up a few notches from previous entries. The introduction of the anti-gravity mechanic later on in the track solidifies this even further, and hearing the crowds cheer you on as you race, seeing the big Mario statue and the fireworks going off in the sky, the Mario Kart TV, helicopters and vans, really sells this idea that Mario Kart has come a long way from being a little ragtag race to a huge sporting event in the Mario world. As for how it plays, well, it is the first track in the game, so its layout is kinda basic, but that's to be expected of an early game track. It kinda needs to be simple in order to ease new players into the game. Despite that, the celebratory, almost ceremonial atmosphere of this track makes it, in my opinion, the best starting track in any Mario Kart game. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. It may not be as technically deep as other tracks, but it does its job as an introduction to the game exceptionally well. This track is probably one of the most just there tracks in the whole game. I mean, it introduces underwater mechanics and toys around with more anti-gravity, but a third of this track being this big loop turn where not much happens kinda neuters it for me. Not a bad track, it has very pretty visuals, and it honestly makes me wish I could go to a water park like this in real life. But in terms of actual driving and tech, it's kinda boring. I'm gonna put this one in B tier. Okay, people rag on about Sonic copying Mario, but are we sure Mario didn't copy Sonic here? This track looks like it was inspired very heavily by Sweet Mountain from Sonic Colors. As someone with a massive sweet tooth, this track had very appealing visuals, and I feel this one steps up a bit from Water Park with the two branching paths about midway through. Interestingly, which path is more ideal to take depends a lot on the situation. Like if you see everyone taking one path, you can take the other one to avoid getting hit by items, or you can take one path on the first lap and the other on the second to build up as many coins as possible. It's strategic stuff like this that I really like in Mario Kart tracks, but in the grand scheme of things, I'll still put this one in B tier. Now this track is where things start to get interesting. There are so many different paths, some involving anti-gravity, an underwater section, and an extra glider path opens up around lap 3. Combine that with the risky shortcut towards the end of a lap, and this track feels a lot more technical than the previous 3, and allows for a lot of creativity in the way you approach it. I'm gonna put this in A tier. I just find it to be one of the more engaging tracks in the game, all while still being relatively simple to navigate, as an early game track should be. The first of 4 Mario circuits in the game. This track gets a lot of flack for being a series of really long turns, but personally, I really love taking all the giant shortcuts this track offers. I'm gonna be real, just because of that, this track goes in A tier for me. Cutting in front of everyone with my star or mushrooms just really tickles my brain in a way few other things can. Plus this track is predominantly anti-gravity and has a lot of twists and turns that make it feel like a really fun roller coaster. Some may call this Mario circuit boring, but I always have a blast on this one. I really do like this track, but I kinda wanna like it more, you know? It has a really comfy vibe, racing through the streets of a town filled with friendly toads. The music is chilled yet energetic enough for a go-kart race, and you can do some cool stunts off the street cars towards the end of a lap. But other than that, I don't feel like this one stands out all too much. Solid B rank from me. Okay, this one is gonna be the hardest to rank so far. I really do like this track, and I almost instinctively vote for it whenever it appears online, but something about it makes me feel like it doesn't deserve more than a B tier ranking. I think what does it for me is that it feels a lot less generic than a lot of other Ghost-themed tracks in the Mario Kart series. I don't know, coming from someone who's never watched Scooby-Doo all that religiously, I think this track kinda gives me What's New Scooby-Doo vibes that fill me with warm nostalgic tingles from when I first watched that show way back in pre-kindergarten. It reminds me of that catchy as heck theme song, I love it so much, so screw it, I'm putting this one in A tier. Boring, lame, boring. Basically a giant U-turn. I don't care if it's anti-gravity going up a waterfall, this track is the equivalent of eating cardboard. C tier, boring, and also lame. Honk shoo. Me. I absolutely love everything about this track aesthetically. The stereotypical airline music, the PA announcements announcing the final boarding call for other Mario Kart locations, and just the way the track mixes in airport staples, such as the luggage conveyor belts and the airplane on the tarmac. It's all fantastic. One of the most well thought out tracks in base Mario Kart 8. This one falls just shy of our first S tier ranking, but it comes close. Although I love this track, it doesn't get me quite as hype and excited as later tracks. Probably one of my favorite beach/underwater tracks in all of Mario Kart. The visuals are absolutely stunning, from the underwater caves to the way the waves crash against the rock face when you get out of the water. There's a variety of different routes to take in the cavern part, and I love the glider shortcut you can take in 200cc. And who could forget that transition from that relaxing underwater music to an incredible saxophone solo. It just sucks that the full version only plays in the highlight reel and not in the actual track. That aside, this has always been one of my favorite tracks in Mario Kart 8, and I'm happy to give it the first S ranking of this tier list. Out of all the tracks we've gone over so far, this one makes the best use of anti-gravity. It gives music park vibes, but instead of traditional instruments, we have a bunch of electronic instruments. The transitions between different musical zones really makes this track feel like a trip or an adventure. That's something I absolutely love in Mario Kart tracks. Plus, the idea of a Mario Kart track taking place in a nightclub is kinda funny to me. You usually see nightclubs in like M-rated games or R-rated movies where not so kid-friendly stuff goes on, so the idea of a nightclub in the Mario world where all the Toads and Koopa Troopers and Shy Guys just go to vibe and dance after a long day of work or whatever is really amusing to me. This one goes in A tier, a really solid track. Mount Wario. Is that a location or a command? Don't think about that too hard. This track brings back the beginning to end section tracks that were introduced in Mario Kart 7, and it certainly does use this idea to the fullest advantage. This track really showcases Wario's grandiose, egotistical personality. I mean, he claimed a whole mountain and named it after himself. From jumping out of a plane to start the race, to using anti-gravity to race along a dam, to shredding your way down the ski slopes DK Summit style, this track again feels like a big adventure. The exciting and dynamic music throughout the track really helps sell this idea as well. Man, every track in the Star Cup in this game is just great, and Mount Wario ends off the cup perfectly. As I'm kind of a sucker for snowy environments in video games, Mount Wario is going in S tier. It just nails that adventurous feeling so perfectly for me. I get what this track was going for with the fluffy cloud aesthetic juxtaposed with Bowser's airship fleet. We always love ourselves a good Gusty Garden reference, but honestly, this track just made me wish they brought back Airship Fortress again. Not a bad track, but it doesn't hit like Airship Fortress did. Solid B tier. One of the more interesting desert tracks in my opinion. Bumpy terrain combined with the slipperiness of the sand makes this a rather difficult track to drive on, especially on 200cc, and it does try something cool with the split path, one being an anti-gravity section and another being more bumpy terrain. But the layout itself is not what I'm exactly the biggest fan of, so I'm putting this one in B tier. This is my second favorite Bowser's Castle in the whole series, right behind N64 Bowser's Castle. God, I wish they brought that one back. Rather than most previous Bowser Castles having somber, sort of spooky, horror adjacent music, we've got another hard rock and big band arrangement that I feel perfectly captures Bowser's aggressive personality, a cool change of pace from previous Bowser Castles. It really uses anti-gravity to achieve a more dynamic feel than previous Bowser's Castles as well. But one issue I have with it is the stupid wrecking ball. I feel like you do not have enough time to see where it's swinging to preemptively avoid it, so it often feels like it's up to the flip of a coin whether you're going to avoid it or not. But all around an awesome track. I'm not sure whether to put this in S tier or A tier. I'm gonna say it barely makes it to S tier. I always get so hyped whenever this track appears online. I don't know. I do really enjoy racing on this track. It's a bit unique with the space station theme, but I honestly felt they could have done more of the anti-gravity mechanics and stuff. His music isn't bad, but combined with the track layout, it really makes it lack that sense of finality that the other Rainbow Roads have. And perhaps that was the point, seeing as we have 4 other Rainbow Roads in this game, but I can't help but feel this one is kind of lackluster. Putting this in B tier. It's not bad by any means, but just about every other Rainbow Road is more exciting. I don't like this track, I never liked this track, it's really boring and generic. One of the most forgettable tracks in all of Mario Kart, right up there with his cousin N64 Moo Moo Farm. I completely forgot both of these tracks existed before I started making this video. What kind of pisses me off about this one is that of all the tracks they could have pulled out of Mario Kart Wii, why this one? The fact that this was picked over Toad's Factory even after the booster course pass just blows my mind. Plus the cows look stupid. Yeah, I said it. First D tier of the video, let's go. I guess the layout isn't horribly offensive, but this track honestly does not deserve to be in this game. Probably the most boring Mario circuit in the game. It does have a lot of shortcuts, which I always like, and the big band arrangement of the GBA circuit theme is always a great listen. But other than that, it's a just there kind of track. B tier. Come on, Nintendo, how are you gonna give us the masterpiece that is Dolphin Shoals, then give us this lame, generic beach track? Only thing that makes it interesting is the glider section and the underwater parts. I don't want to call this track lazy, but like Shy Guy Falls, it's so painfully unremarkable that it goes in C tier for me. As the first traffic course ever introduced in Mario Kart, this one definitely shows its age, even remastered in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Who liked this track? Like, be so for real, who actually likes this track? Psychopaths, that's who. People who have no regard for the mental well-being of others. Okay, maybe that's a bit extreme, but also not really. What makes this track suck so much compared to other traffic courses is that it feels like you can't really avoid the cars effectively. When you take turns tight, you'll often find yourself in a position where you're literally unable to maneuver your vehicle out of the way of a car in time. Not to mention that the actual layout of the track is insanely simple and uninspired. They did add anti-gravity sections across the walls, but they are probably the most useless side route of any other track in the whole game, and not worth taking unless you really want to avoid those cars. First E tier of the video, no brainer. A solid contender for the worst track in the game. And if you vote this track online, thank you for telling on yourself. Now I know who to report to the FBI for undue torture on Mario Kart players around the world. Ah, Bagger's Paradise. Even though I hate bagging, I do like this track a lot, especially on 200cc. Abusing the shortcuts is a lot of fun, and trying to stay on track amidst the low traction desert sands is a nice challenge. They turned the last part into an oasis. You can trick off the fallen pillars, which spices things up a bit, and I honestly don't have much else to say about this track, other than that it's a lot of fun. A tier. They got really creative with this track. There are a lot of huge shortcuts you can take through the water, and the big curves make this a fun challenge on 200cc. Just going off of how much they facelifted this track from the SNES version, this one gets to be A tier. Simple yet effective, as they say. One of the most beloved tracks from Mario Kart 64. I enjoy this track a lot as a frontrunner, as you can get pretty far ahead of the pack on 200cc. I know a lot of Mario Kart 64 fans were absolutely distraught to find you couldn't get to Peach's Castle anymore. Despite this being one of my favorite circuit tracks in the game, because this is basically Peach Circuit, I'm gonna have to give this an A tier ranking. Sorry, maybe they could have gone higher if they left the castle in. Strangely, this track gives me a lot of nostalgia for Super Smash Bros. Brawl, probably because this is where I was first made aware of the Donkey Kong Country series this track was inspired by. I haven't actually played the Donkey Kong Country games, but I appreciated catering to those fans. This track has a good variety of paths, and I especially love the glider shortcut right before the temple. This track has always been very special to me since Mario Kart 7, so I'm putting this in S tier, admittedly for nostalgic reasons. This is a track I always find myself gravitating towards when it appears online, although I always noticed how compressed this track was compared to the original in Mario Kart DS. It stays faithful to the original layout, sure, but it feels so much smaller. I know this is also true of other retro tracks, but this is where I notice it the most. I do like the little anti-gravity section with the fire bars though. Solid A tier track right here. There have been worse snow tracks in Mario Kart, but also better, many of which are in this game. The underwater parts leading into anti-gravity are a nice touch, and I like how wide the road is on this track, allowing you breathing room to dodge obstacles, but this track doesn't really do anything special for me, B tier. One of the most unique and creative tracks in Mario Kart history. As a band kid in high school, this track instilled a great sense of wonder in me when I first played it on Mario Kart 7. Those twists and turns along the different instruments always make me smile, and the part with the bouncing music notes is a fun test of your reflexes, timing, and driving skills. This one goes high up in A tier for me, just shy of S tier. Another very unique track in that it has a lot of different branching paths, and I mean a lot of them. This would make for a really fun and dynamic feeling race, if most people didn't just take the top path across the little bridge, which is considered the fastest. Even still, there are probably niche strategies in which other paths are viable, but this is another track I heavily gravitate towards online. I'll put this one comfortably in A tier. This is one of my favorites in Mario Kart DS. Like Wario Stadium, it does feel a bit compressed compared to the original, but it is much easier to see the pendulum swinging and avoid them. I love what they did with the gears towards the end though. It's fun trying to position yourself in just the right way to be able to trick off the gears. Or if you want to avoid getting hit by items, you could just take the glider path, not to mention the shortcuts you could take along the clock hands. They did a great job breathing new life into this course with modern Mario Kart mechanics. This one again goes in A tier. Yeah, I'm starting to notice that A tier is getting pretty bloated. But if I like a track, I like a track, so whatever. Let's keep going. Oh my god, I love this track so much. It's just amazing. The tight corridors where you have to drift through, the jazzy music with the underground theme references, the underwater anti-gravity. If this track comes up online, there's like a 95% chance I'm voting it. S tier, easy S tier, no one will ever debate me on that. One of the more challenging tracks from Mario Kart Wii. The setting of this track is really intense with some cheeky shortcuts if you're perceptive enough. I like how this track really rewards you for knowing its ins and outs. Plus the front running beats on this track go harder than any other front running beats in the game. It's a really exciting track, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and put it in A tier. A legendary Mario Kart track right here. The music alone has brought tears to many a player's eyes, and the visuals have been given a massive facelift from the original N64 version, making it one of the most beautiful tracks in the game. As for how the track itself plays, it's just a bunch of really long turns. Not much is really going on here apart from the bouncing chain chops causing ripples which you can trick off of. They made it a section track too, which makes it weirdly short for a Rainbow Road. I get that they needed to shorten it, as the original run could go for over 5 minutes, which is way too long. I feel like they could have just cut it down to 2 laps, like Wario Coliseum and Double Dash. This track nails that sense of finality way better than Mario Kart 8's Rainbow Road, but it's a lot less engaging to actually drive on. I'm gonna put this in B tier, right behind Mario Kart 8 Rainbow Road. I know this track is very special to a lot of people, but as far as Rainbow Roads go, this one isn't all that great when you look past graphics and music. Ah yes, Meta Character Circuit. They made this track work quite well despite its unique shape, and I kinda want them to make more tracks like this. Pulling off the waterfall shortcut is always fun on 200cc, and this kinda makes up for them removing the secret tunnel shortcut. This is a great track, and I don't think really anyone dislikes it. Easy A tier. Do I even need to say anything about this track? Replace the definition of boring in the dictionary with the words Excite Bike Arena, and that would convey the exact same meaning. Press R over and over again, then turn. That's this track. I guess the throwback to Excite Bike on the NES can be appreciated. Why did they just make this track an oval? As far as I know, Excite Bike 64 had uniquely shaped tracks, so why couldn't they go all out like they did with Waluigi Stadium, for example? I can't decide whether to put this in D tier or E tier. I do find myself groaning a bit when this track comes up online. Yeah, this one goes in E tier. It's not as offensive as Toad's Turnpike, but this track is so agonizingly mid that it honestly just crosses over to being straight up bad. Kinda like Sonic Forces if you played that game. Oh, I've been looking forward to talking about this one. I have been a huge fan of traditional Chinese architecture, scenery, and music ever since I first played the Chenan level in Sonic Unleashed. And this track takes some of my favorite aesthetics in musical genres and combines them into one of the greatest tracks in Mario Kart history. In aesthetics, music, and design, this track blows all three categories clean out of the water, with lots of sharp turns in quick succession, keeping you on your toes, especially on 200cc. Challenging, beautiful, and with absolutely incredible music, this track couldn't go anywhere else but S tier, probably my absolute favorite track that we've covered so far. Classic Nintendo. They'll make references to F-Zero in other games until the nether freezes over, but God forbid they actually make a brand new game. And no, I don't count F-Zero 99, that game doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, my opinion on this track changes a lot depending on whether it's 150cc or 200cc. On 150, this track is kinda boring to me. A lot of it is just a relatively straight line with a whole bunch of speed boosters. I think what makes the track better for me on 200 is the higher speed that kinda helps it feel more like I'm in an actual F-Zero race. So if we're going off of 150, I'd put this track in low B tier, but in 200, I think I'd put it in like the middle of A tier. So let's meet in the middle and just put this one in B tier. This track always annoyed me as a kid. I always found it one of the more difficult tracks, though it did get a little easier since they made the minecarts into anti-gravity speed boosters rather than obstacles that could potentially knock you off course. I'm putting this one in B tier. The music is a fun listen too. Well, this is different. They put this track at the second in a cup rather than the last, like Rainbow Roads usually are. This is one of the simplest Rainbow Roads, but I don't mind it that much. It's still a fun challenge like it was in the OG Super Mario Kart, but only this time without terrible controls. They added a nice touch with the ability to trick off the Thwomp's ripples too. I also like how they made it take place above the Mushroom Kingdom countryside at night instead of space. It's still a great track 30 plus years later, so I'm putting it in A tier. A lot of people aren't too fond of this track, but I don't think it's so bad. I like the two forking paths and the risky shortcuts they scatter along the icebergs. Kinda makes you think whether to just play it safe and stay on the main path or gamble on the shortcuts to get ahead. Other than that, this track is kind of in just their territory, so it goes in B tier. I'm sure Zelda fans collectively passed out when this track was revealed. As someone who's not a Zelda fan and has tried to get into the series 3 times to no avail, the only thing about this track that stands out to me is the music. I do love the part where you can hit all 3 of the anti-grav spinners to open a secret ramp shortcut in the castle. One of the most creative shortcuts I've seen in Mario Kart. This bumped it up to just barely an A tier for me. This track blew my mind when I first played it on Mario Kart DS. Never before have I seen a track in Mario Kart or any racing game that has been crafted so masterfully and intricately. How it encapsulates such simplicity and complexity at the same time is simply mesmerizing. It may appear a simple oval, but make no mistake, only the very best Mario Karters will stand a chance on this technical track. No amount of stars and bullet bills will carry you. Truly, it almost made me break down bawling with how wonderful every aspect of it is. I award this track the honor of going in E tier for extravagantly amazing! Yep, Bagger's Paradise 2.0. Filled with gigantic shortcuts, this track is always a joy to make a comeback on. Especially when you change the 2 shortcuts in the anti-gravity section together and absolutely destroy the competition. This goes in A tier. The comeback game on this track makes it super satisfying to play, and it's one of my top picks online. I've always gotten a serious kick out of this track, driving through this giant forest where all these Toads and Shy Guys live, and going down the waterway through the trees. I just really love the vibe of this track. It's always fun to take the end shortcut shroomless on 200cc and cut in front of first place at the last minute. A lot of people may disagree, but this is going in S tier, mostly for the vibes, not gonna lie. The music certainly helps too, sounding like it came straight out of a Disney movie or something. While I'm all for the Animal Crossing representation in this game, I hate how cramped and tiny this track feels. I get hit by items non-stop all the time on this track because of how narrow it is. But the 4 seasons are a nice touch, so this landed in B tier for me. I can appreciate the Animal Crossing fan service, but it's more annoying than fun to play for me. Now this is a location I love to see as the final world in a mainline Mario game. Bowser's strongholds have typically been associated with old medieval steampunkish vibes, but this is like Bowser taking a page out of Dr. Eggman's playbook. The futuristic vibes are such a breath of fresh air, and like Dragon Driftway, I enjoy the twists and turns, especially around the middle part. Since Mario Kart 7, I was hugely in love with this track, and I was delighted to see it return in 8. This track goes in S tier, it's so much fun. This one got a serious heck of an upgrade. They really went for a unique route for remixing this music and added some nice risky shortcuts towards the end for confident drivers. I really enjoy the pure chaos that ensues on this track on 200cc. I think this gets to go in A tier. One of the most challenging tracks in the game, I'd say. It can be quite hard to see the subway trains coming, and they often take up so much of the track that it can feel almost impossible to avoid. Even when coming out of shortcuts, you have to be on the lookout for them and be careful of when to take one so you don't run headfirst into the end of them. I like the risk-reward factor of the higher routes you can take to avoid the trains. They're slower, yes, but they do help you to keep safe from the trains, which could make the difference between a good or a bad finish. I'm putting this one in A tier. As one of the last tracks in base Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, this one provides a good challenge to end off on. Okay, no matter what else I say regarding this track, the music here is a huge standout amongst Mario Kart 8's already incredible soundtrack. Despite my being annoyed at Nintendo's continued reluctance to make a new entry, again, F-Zero 99 doesn't count, I must say that they absolutely did the series more than proud with this big band rendition of Big Blue's theme. Both the main guitarist and the saxophonist both deserve a medal or something for this performance, my god! As for the track itself, I think it does a great job of capturing the anti-gravity craziness of F-Zero in a Mario Kart track. I really just wish it was longer. You barely get to hear the first part of the song before transitioning to the final lap version. Even then, you don't get to hear the whole of that either. Kinda disappointing. Despite that, this track goes in A tier for me. A thrilling and satisfying end to base Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's track roster. Maybe if Nintendo announces a new F-Zero, I'd be willing to bump it up a spot. Okay, that does it for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's base tracks, but now it's time to rank the Booster Course Pass tracks. Keep in mind that I never really played Mario Kart Tour as I'm not all that into mobile games, so this is the first time I'm experiencing the tour tracks in this game. With all that said, let's continue. As the first tour track in the Booster Course Pass, this one left quite a negative first impression. Yeah, it's in Paris, it has the Eiffel Tower, which is all well and good, but I think this track suffers from the problem of feeling like a middle school replica of Paris rather than actual Paris. It left me thinking, geez, are all the tour tracks gonna be this basic? Especially since the first and second lap are identical and the third lap is just the first and second lap in reverse. So it definitely isn't as varied as later tour tracks. This one was very far from impressive for me, so I'm putting it in C tier. I feel like people are entirely too harsh on this track. Yes, it has a very simple layout, but have we forgotten that this is literally the first track of Mario Kart 7? Of course it's gonna be easy and simple to ease new players into the game. Considering how we're early on into the Booster Course Pass by this point, it honestly did make sense to bring this one back. As far as starting tracks go, I honestly think this is one of the better ones behind GCN Luigi Circuit and Mario Kart Stadium. It has a few fun shortcuts to take, and it's the track where I got my first and only sub 1 minute time trial, which I'm personally really proud of, so I'm putting this track in B tier. It's not exactly mind-blowing, but the hate for this track is blown way out of proportion. I've always had a soft spot for this track just because of how relaxing it is to drive on. You know, it's just a quiet mountain path with happy-go-lucky hillbilly hiking music playing in the background. Gives road trip vibes. It's really scenic and soothing, especially if you're front-running or playing time trials. Though I guess the boulders falling down the cliffside on that one big turn kinda fly in the face of that. Regardless, A tier. Mostly chill, easygoing track, and one of my top picks from Mario Kart 64. One of the most beloved tracks in Mario Kart history. I'd say they did a pretty good justice here. The road is a bit narrow here, it feels like, but not to the same severity as other remade tracks. I like the new glider cuts you can do in this version as well. This wasn't my absolute favorite track in Mario Kart Wii, but I am definitely fond of it like many others. Solid A tier track. In contrast, this track isn't very well liked, and I can definitely see why. With Tokyo being the largest city/metropolitan area in the whole world, you'd think there'd be a lot more going on here, especially considering that this is representing Japan, the country Nintendo originates from. But it's actually very underwhelming. The first and second lap are nearly identical, and it's one of the shortest tracks in the whole game, with the 200cc world record being a mere 59 seconds. The only thing that's really remarkable about this one is the music, which is extremely catchy and even throws in some Mario Kart 7 leitmotif for a good measure. I find myself listening to this one when I'm just running errands or doing chores. It's a great listen. Other than that, this track is pretty mid to subpar. It's going in C tier. This is actually my favorite traffic track in the game. The traffic flows in a way that you never feel like you're being ran into unfairly, and the windy roads in the beginning part are always a thrill to drift through. I also love the new pipe shortcut. Something else I realized is that if you simply switch the time for day to night, this could literally pass for an Initial D inspired track. I mean, just look at it, am I wrong? That just made me love this track even more. Even though the name and concept aren't entirely original, the name of the track itself simply having 3 letters taken off the double dash track Mushroom Bridge. This one I always look forward to racing on. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I think this track deserves to be an S tier. I love it more than most, I feel like. I was actually really digging the look of this track when I first played it, but then I noticed that some parts felt off. The layout didn't seem to be exactly what I remembered from when I first played this track in Mario Kart DS. Parts like the ramp over the hairpin turn were missing, the entire ending area was replaced with a glider section. I did a search online for a comparison video, which proved my suspicions correct, and a lot of people were not happy about this, rightfully so. Why Nintendo decided to mess with the original track's layout to such a degree is beyond me, but it's kind of a disservice to Mario Kart Super Circuit. I'm putting this track in C tier for this reason alone. I don't think we've ever seen such an egregious butchering of a retro track before in Mario Kart. This track is different, fundamentally different. Tokyo Blur may have been a disappointment, but they kinda made it up to us with this track. It's one of the hardest tracks in the game in my opinion, with sudden super sharp turns, lots of ninja traps, and bars along the rooftop at the end that can really throw off your driving if you don't know how to properly time your tricks, and decide which bars to trick off of. And this isn't even to mention one of the 200cc gap jump. One of my favorite shortcuts in the whole game. I had a blast practicing this one for hours in time trials, listening to the epic musical piece composed for this track all the while. This had better come back in Mario Kart 9 or whatever the next Mario Kart is. Easy S tier, anything less would be pure cap. First off, I love how they went for an old school 1920s vibe when it came to the music for this track. It really makes my inner band kid smile. As for the track itself, it's another super mediocre tour track unfortunately. Again, for a city as huge and iconic as New York, where each of its boroughs like Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Bronx are big enough to be major cities by themselves, they could have done so much more with this track. It's also a really short track, as true to its name, the 200cc world record is only 58 seconds. So yeah, another lame tour track. It's right to C tier with you. Fortunately, I do think the tour tracks get much better from here on out. I remember running time trials non-stop on this track in Mario Kart Wii. I think the simple graphics and head-bopping music really resonated with me somehow. I honestly don't know how to explain the way this track made me feel. They kept it simple with the remix, keeping the original SNES instruments with a jamming drum solo laid over it, which works quite well. Despite it being a very old track, it remains a very enjoyable one to this day. The drifting through the snake-like turns is still as satisfying now as ever. I'm putting it in A tier, a long-time classic that's aged remarkably well. Not a fan of this track if I'm keeping it real. The only thing that it has going for it is the train. And that is a really annoying obstacle because the road is so ridiculously narrow when it comes through that avoiding it is almost impossible. This isn't like Super Bell Subway where you can avoid the subway cars if you're cautious and perceptive enough. If that train comes through, there's a 90% chance you're getting hit. And they also shortened the track for no reason. The track only ran for a little over 2 minutes in Mario Kart 64. There was no reason for them to do that. Like Sky Garden, this was quite the botched remake. I'm tempted to put this all the way down in D tier, but I'm gonna be a bit graceful and put it at the bottom of C tier. Oh, the hype on this one was revealed to be coming back. Waluigi Pinball is certainly one of the most thematically and aesthetically unique tracks in Mario Kart. It's also quite the tricky track, as avoiding the pinballs themselves as they roll down the track can be quite a headache, but drifting along the curves as you try not to hit the pinballs is quite a fun, intense experience. This track will sit comfortably in A tier. I know a lot of people might disagree and put it up in S tier, but there are other DS tracks I like more. Sydney Sprint single-handedly changed my perception of how the tour tracks would be throughout this DLC. They seriously upped their game with this one. The roller coasters and various attractions along the side of the road are a sight for sore eyes. There are plenty of shortcuts on this track, including the rail jump shortcut towards the end of lap 2, which is always a thrill to pull off. Each lap feels a lot more unique than the previous 3 tour tracks we covered. The third lap is simply the first lap in reverse, but the second takes us along an entirely new path, which really helps things feel a lot more varied overall. And again, this track's music is a huge standout among Mario Kart 8's already amazing OST. The main melody is so ridiculously catchy and hummable, and those saxophone solos are just pure bliss to the ears. The song that really fills you with a sense of thrill and excitement as you drift through the streets of Sydney. This is how you do a tour track. Sydney Sprint goes in S tier. Congratulations for nailing it unlike the previous 3. Out of all the snow tracks they could have brought back for this DLC, why this one? This track just screams generic to me. From the name of the music to the track layout, the only thing that's noteworthy is the snow setting, and the giant shortcut you can do on 200cc. Why couldn't they have brought back Frappe Snowland from Mario Kart 64, or even Vanilla Lake 1 or 2 from Super Mario Kart would have been a more welcome pick in my opinion. Call me out if you want, but most of the reason I'm not fond of this track is because I feel it stole a slot from many other noteworthy tracks in the series. I'm putting this one in B tier. I know a lot of people love this track to death, but I'm quite impartial to it. The mushrooms you can bounce off were an interesting concept, but I found them more annoying than fun. If you get hit by an item while hopping over the pits, you're in for a long fall and will probably end up back in last place. Although there's a lot of really cool tech you can pull off in 200cc, so who knows, maybe more runs and time trials will change my perception of this track, but for now this track goes firmly in B tier. Oh brother, this track. You know, it's pretty, it's colorful, it makes you want ice cream, but it's another giant oval like Excite Bike Arena. Sorry Nintendo, but no amount of pretty aesthetics and anti-gravity will make up for this track. I will give it a point that it has some variance in elevation, and there's a bit more to it than doing tricks and driving in an oval, but that only brings it up to D tier. Mario Kart's take on trash coated in gold. London Loop, the only tour track I've been to in real life, and I'd say it's quite faithful in capturing the vibe of London, only it's supposed to be more cloudy and rainy. I really like the variance between the laps in this track. Each lap feels like almost an entirely different track. The music is just good old classic rock, which fits as London was a very important place for the development of rock music, also because this track is in the Rock Cup. This one gets a rock solid A ranking from me. You might think I have similar complaints for this track as I do with Snowland, but I actually enjoy this track a good bit, mostly because they do a lot more to spice up this track than they did with Snowland. You go underwater and into an anti-gravity section, and due to it being so dark down there, it really adds to the spooky factor. They really did a nice job with the music remix as well, so overall this would go in A tier for me. The best, most glorious track in Mario Kart 7 has returned. It's great to have you back, Rock Rock Mountain. This track nails that sense of adventure I'm looking for perfectly. With 3 glider sections allowing you to get an eye full of the mountain scenery, and driving up that incline with the falling boulders culminating in a huge glide over the finish line and a giant chasm, this track is a thrill from start to finish. I also love that gigantic shortcut you can take if you have a star or multiple mushrooms. It's also really flexible. Only have 1 mushroom, just land on grass after the second glider and boost towards the ramp. Have triple mushrooms or a golden or a star, and you basically get to cut through most of the second half of the track. I've loved this track so much from the moment I first loaded it up on Mario Kart 7. This one is another no-brainer S tier. This track is a vibe. The music is so beautiful and chill, almost too chill for a racing game. It's still as fun as ever driving through the leaf piles and grabbing items. Too bad you can't grab stars from the leaf piles anymore, though that's probably for the better. Though this track is where you start to notice that they didn't exactly port over the half pipes perfectly from Mario Kart Wii. I can almost never land properly after going up the half pipe, when it was never a problem in Mario Kart Wii. All that said, this track is still a blast, so I'm putting it in A tier. Another tour track they absolutely nailed. Each track feels unique to the last, and the traffic isn't very intrusive. There are a good amount of shortcuts and alternative paths as well. I had a great time running this one on 200cc. It's surprisingly hard to master on that speed setting, but I enjoyed the challenge. And the music is a different beast. Never have I heard such radically different music genres blended together in such perfect harmony. Really goes to show the absolute wizardry of Nintendo's composers. This one gets another S ranking from me. There's almost no track in this game I'm more nostalgic for, and I'm happy to say that nostalgia was not tainted with this remake. As much flack as the Booster Course Pass gets for its downgraded graphics in comparison to base Mario Kart 8, I think this track looks quite beautiful. Weaving through the hedges trying to find the best path is as fun as ever, though they did remove some of the bushes, which kind of neuters this fun factor a bit. Although reversing the second lap did add a nice surprise trick to this classic track. Another one I'm happy to throw all the way up in S tier, although I will admit this is highly influenced by nostalgia. With Christmas being my favorite holiday, this track was an absolute joy to the eyes. I like how the track gradually increases in elevation, then has a long slope downward. I mean, it's a mountain, so that's to be expected, but it kinda gives the feeling of you driving up to Santa's workshop or something. Other than the Christmas vibe though, I don't think there's anything really special about this track, so I give it a B tier. Okay, kind of a hot take, but I feel like the reason a lot of people like this Rainbow Road so much is because it uses the N64 Rainbow Road leitmotif. Yeah, it's a section track, which was new for a Rainbow Road when this track was first introduced, but again, it's so short for a Rainbow Road. But it does have the theme of racing among plants and celestial bodies, which is a nice twist. I guess why I don't find this one quite as impressive as many others is the lack of shortcuts and techniques to master. It's kinda just full of long drifts. Despite all that, I'm going to reluctantly put this in A tier. The music kinda saves it for me. I honestly enjoy the build up to the N64 part more than that part itself. Man, the music for this track is just so feel good and happy-go-lucky. I love it. I wasn't super fond of this track at first, but the more I practiced it on 200cc and learned some new tricks, the more I came to enjoy it. You can do a huge shortcut over the bridge near the beginning. I also learned to abuse underwater driving mechanics to charge mini turbos fast and release them at just the right time. Suffice it to say, this track has seriously grown on me, and it really lives up to its name of those sharp 90-degree turns, so A tier for this one. When deciding my favorite GBA track in this game, it's a toss-up between this one and Boo Lake. I like how you have to be careful and really control your drifts to avoid the mud pits that slow you down and the piranha plants. And the elevation up through the waterfall is a welcome touch too. Thanks for not butchering this track, Nintendo, unlike the other GBA remakes. A tier. This was my favorite Nitro track in Mario Kart Wii, and I was so hyped to see it return. I feel like the half pipes not working properly is kind of a blessing rather than a curse. In a weird way, it helps breathe new life into this course. You've got to make sure you go up them at the right angle so as not to lose too much speed or get flung in the wrong direction altogether. It's always fun to watch everyone try, and often fail miserably, to do the new gigantic gap jump shortcut. Honestly, if you take the normal path, you are not playing this track right. For mostly nostalgic purposes, we're putting this one in S tier. Good to have you back, DK Summit. I never grew up playing Yoshi's Island or other games in the series, but I have to put some respect on this track. They spared zero expense on nostalgic fan service for this. From the Yoshi coins to the level start theme when you're at the starting line to all the iconic enemies to Poochie to the question mark cloud to the freaking music that makes you feel so nostalgic and happy you could break down sobbing, it's truly incredible. Yoshi's Island fans, I'm happy you get a track that caters to you. S tier without a doubt. I kinda hate this track. I tried many times to give it a fair shake. I thought, maybe it's because I need more practice or something along those lines, but no, it's just that the layout is a mess. They tried to do a thing with the upper level subway stations and the lower level streets, but it was sloppily executed in my opinion. You can barely see where you're driving as you go up and down the stairs, and there's so much random crap in the streets that can mess up your driving. It's not as boring as the first 3 tour tracks we covered, but it is really annoying to drive on. Paris, Tokyo, and New York may be boring, but they don't actively annoy me. Bangkok Rush is going into D tier. It's just too sloppy to ignore. Considering this Mario circuit was featured in the Star Cup in Mario Kart DS, it's got a lot more going on than other Mario circuits. A lot more sharp twists and turns, the big piranha plant shooting fireballs your way, and they even added a giant wiggler for some reason. He also changed up some of the scenery and elevation while still staying true to the original layout, so this one was really well done. We're putting this one in A tier. Another one of my favorites from Mario Kart Wii. It's been made quite a bit harder in this game due to the terrain being slippery, meaning controlling your vehicle can be quite difficult if you don't have good traction, which the builds I like to run often don't. I find myself running into the pipes in the half-pipe section a lot more too, but I don't really mind this, as again, it kinda breathes new life into this classic track. This one gets an A tier rating from me. Definite contender for one of my favorite city tracks. Again, despite the lackluster graphics throughout the Booster Course Pass, this track has absolutely stunning aesthetics and visuals. The city appears lively and energetic with all the colorful lights all around, and the Chinatown offers a refreshing change of pace mid-race. Gliding through the rings to maintain your speed is a lot of fun, and the music gives an exciting nightlife vibe that really enhances the racing experience. On top of all this, the road is generally nice and wide, allowing you to maneuver and avoid getting hit by items. This is going in S tier along with Sydney Sprint. I feel like I'm in the minority here, but I didn't like this track when I first played it. I attribute that to playing it for the first time on 200TC online and getting screwed by not knowing the layout beforehand. But when I practiced it in time trials, I really grew to appreciate the old rustic scenery and the epic, heroic sounding music, though the path up the Parthenon is a bit sloppy. The stairs make it hard to control your vehicle, so you need to make sure you're aligned correctly beforehand so you don't run into the pillars. But this track is better than I initially gave it credit for. A tier. The idea of a racetrack on a cruise ship is exactly the kind of craziness we all play Mario Kart for, but I don't really think this track to be anything stellar beyond that. No shortcuts or anything too technical to learn. It's kinda in the just there territory. As B tier as a B tier track can be. I've never really known what to think of this track. Sometimes I really love it, other times I feel it's nothing special. I think that's largely due to the flow of the traffic and the variability in that. Interestingly, the key to this track isn't always to take turns as tightly as possible, but to chain boosts from the speed boosters even though they're on the far side of the track. This leads to really intense races where you have to weave through traffic at high speed, not being able to risk any mistakes, lest you lose all the momentum you've built up. Also, I wish the first part of this track's music played throughout the inner city portion. It just goes harder in my opinion, but all in all, a solid A tier track. This one certainly came out of left field, but can we just take a second to talk about how absolutely disgusting this track would be in real life? Trigger warning for grossness, I guess, but could you imagine being that small and seeing all the germs in the tub? Not to mention all the horrible gunk and hair that would be in the shower drain, and also getting sprayed by the water coming out of the toilet? Absolutely would not be as fun as it's depicted in game. That aside, it does feel like this track takes you on a journey. You start off around the sink, brushing your teeth, then you end up in the tub and going through the drain, taking a shower, then over the toilet and onto the stand where the towels are, drying off from your shower. This is a really creative track that I enjoy a lot, so we've got ourselves another A tier here. I don't know, I think this track is kinda boring. Not super boring, just kinda mid. I personally think this is where the Booster Course Pass shows in terms of downgraded graphics. The scale issues really show here too. The music isn't that great in my opinion, one of the few songs in the soundtrack that I wouldn't consider a banger. I'm putting this one in B tier. Pretty meh track. Man, they really botched this one. Not only did they mess with the original layout yet again, the track's defining feature, the sunset turning into night, is completely absent. Unacceptable. And no, I do not want to hear any excuses about the lighting engine or anything like that. Nintendo's dev teams are full of incredibly brilliant, intelligent developers and programmers, so I'm certain they could have found some sort of workaround. To me, this track screams sloppiness and lack of polish and attention to detail. Super Circuit fans, I feel your pain. We're putting this one in D tier. Kinda the same story with Koopa Cape, though not as egregious. They kinda messed up the tube section by getting rid of the flowing waterway and the electric bars, though it is nice to be able to take the waterway cut at the end without a mushroom. I can be a little more forgiving here and put this track in B tier. What a fantastic track. The city is beautiful with the Aurora Borealis in the background, and I love the constant variance in environments here. From the forest to the park to the skating rink, this track always keeps you engaged. The music is also beautiful, having a bit more of a serious vibe than other tour remixes. I think they were kinda trying to capture that Dancing with the Stars kind of vibe. You know, the romance, the intensity, the epicness. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but that's kinda what this track sounds like to me. In my opinion, this one makes S tier, a perfect example of a great tour track. I like this track. It's pretty alright. It forces you into quick decision making situation with the routes you have to take around the fountains, but the only area of note is the ruined Colosseum with the chain chops. Almost makes me feel like they should also have done a city like Venice. Anyways, it's a good track. B tier. We've got a classic right here. It's a challenging track, with all of its sudden twists and turns down steep mountain slopes as boulders roll downhill. These turns are so sharp that you'll often find yourself drift braking even on 150cc. The gaff shortcut is still there, although nerfed, and there's another little shortcut you can take by getting up on the ridge, though I still haven't learned how to do it effectively. A fun, wild, and challenging race, just like back in Mario Kart Wii and Double Dash. Solid A rank track. I was so hyped for this one. I honestly wasn't a fan of the remix at first, but it has grown on me. It sounds a lot more emotional than the original version, which kinda hits different now that we're getting to the end of the booster course pass at this point. The scenery is as beautiful as ever, and the track is as much fun as it was in Wii. Definite A tier to this one. And salute to Daisy. She's come a long way since her introduction in Super Mario Land. I wish we saw more world records and competitive players using her. I mean, she and Peach have the same stats as Yoshi, so it's kinda lost on me why they aren't used more considering the lust a lot of players have for them. Oh, this freaking track, I love it so much. I fell in love with it almost immediately, and I spent so many hours running it in time trials. This is almost like Dolphin Shoals on steroids. There is so much going on here with all the ruins you can trick off of and how you're almost encouraged to abuse the underwater driving mechanics to take these massive shortcuts. And combined with the music evoke this sense of discovery and adventure almost no other Mario Kart track has been able to match. The music seals the deal, with this seafaring pirate vibe that reminds me of Dragon Roost Island from Zelda, which again I was only introduced to thanks to Super Smash Bros. Brawl. An absolute masterpiece of a track that I will cherish for years to come. I'm putting this one way up there in S tier. What else can I say other than bravo? Someone who minored in Spanish in college and studied a lot of their culture, I freaking love this track. The traditional Spanish sounding music reminds me of games like the Just Cause series, which I played a lot when I was younger, and combined with the music, driving through this track almost felt like an elaborate dance. We have two major landmarks here in the museum and the stadium, making it feel like they really wanted to end off the city tracks with a bang here, and I'd say they succeeded. This one deserves an S tier ranking, but that's probably my cultural bias. This track really tickles my love for snowy tracks, and my love for Super Mario Galaxy. The atmosphere here, despite it being an ice world, just makes me feel so warm. The music sounds like a lullaby of sorts, and I sometimes find myself listening to it when I'm feeling down or just need to focus on something. The variance between paths is nice too. I like how you're really not punished for falling off the ice. This one's going in A tier. Geez, they really gave this track a makeover. It almost felt unrecognizable despite staying faithful to the original layout. It's great to hear a remix of the Evil King Bowser from Super Mario World again after so long, and all the changes in elevation plus the anti-grav section makes this track feel brand new. It's also cool that you could trick off the thwomps at the end. A great rendition of a classic track. a well-earned A-tier ranking. Being honest, this track got me real emotional seeing it come back. All the memories I had of playing Mario Kart Wii with my siblings and cousins as a kid came flooding back, and I just felt so grateful that I got to experience not only such an amazing game, but an amazing franchise. I think this is one of the best Rainbow Roads in the series. It's challenging, it's full of fun twists and turns, it's fast paced, it has beautiful visuals, massively upgraded from Mario Kart Wii, and they even brought back the meteor falling animation. A legendary S-tier track that makes for the perfect ending to the Booster Course Pass. And that's it. Those are my rankings for every track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Despite its flaws, this is truly one of the best racing games of all time, and it's well deserving of its success. I do want to start streaming this game and playing it with viewers, if I can garner a big enough audience for that to be viable. And I hope to keep enjoying these tracks and finding new ways to cut down my times in time trials. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me and I hope you enjoyed it. This is where I'd like to hear from you. If you could bring back just one more track to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which one would it be? And maybe also name one track that you put in each tier ranking. I'd love to get some fun discussions going on in the comments. Here's to many more years of great Mario Kart memories. As always, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.